At dawn, Kyanjin looked peaceful, all silver ridges and pink prayer flags, but Pema felt the mountain holding its breath. Driving the yaks along the upper pasture, she noticed a thin crack running across the ice above the glacier lake. Yesterday, it had been a line. Now it looked like a wound. The water below had swollen, bright and blue, like an eye opening slowly in the dark. Even the bells on the yaks seemed to hush. Pema stopped, listening to the strange silence. Her grandmother's voice returned to her, soft as wind through the stones. When the mountain goes quiet, listen harder. She stared at the crack, then at the village below, and a cold thought cut through the morning light. If the lake breaks before night, will Kyanjin be ready? She felt the valley waiting to answer somehow. Yet, even as that question pressed against her chest, Pema kept moving because the yaks needed her and the morning would not wait for fear. She was 16, tall for her age and steady as the rope she used to guide the herd. Her father had taught her to read tracks in snow and weather and clouds. Now he worked down the trail and Pema carried his lessons like a hidden knife. Her mother kept the house warm, the meals shared, the prayers spoken before sleep. Her little brother, Tashi, copied Pema's every step, pretending a stick was a herder's staff and laughing when the yaks nudged him aside. Beneath the glacier, the village seemed small, a cluster of stone homes and prayer flags pressed against a giant white wall. Yet everything they needed came from there, the animals that fed them, the trade trail that connected them, the school where children learned to dream, the meltwater that filled their tanks. Pema had seen elders lose goats to storms, barley to hail, and hope to long winters, but she had never seen the whole village standing under threat at once. She looked up at the swelling lake again, and unease settled in her chest like snow that would not melt. By the following morning, her unease had grown sharper because the glacier lake was clearly bigger than the week before. Ice cracked somewhere above her with a sharp, hollow boom, and muddy water began seeping from the outlet like bruised blood. Birds burst from the rocks, wheeling away in panic, and the yaks refused to cross the stream, snorting and backing into one another. Pema climbed a ridge for a clearer view and saw the lake pressing hard against the moraine, its blue surface trembling as if it wanted out. She ran to her uncle, breathless, but he waved her off. "Mountains always change shape," he said. "Don't turn every shadow into fear." The word stung, yet Pema could not ignore what her eyes had seen. She remembered the village disaster training, the bell, the route, the faces of children learning to move fast. With her heart beating hard against her ribs, she decided to check the warning post herself before dusk turned the valley quiet and dangerous once more. As she walked toward the warning post, the memory of that training pulled her back to the village hall weeks earlier after a landslide had sent everyone running in the night. A ranger had drawn the glacier lake on a chalkboard and circled it hard. "This is the hazard." Then she pointed to the homes below, the school, the trail, the animals, the prayer house, and the water tanks. "This is exposure. Resilience is knowing what to do before fear takes your voice." At first, people laughed when they practiced the evacuation route up the ridge, almost like children playing at being serious. Someone teased the warning bell, someone else pretended the radio was a singing yak, but the laughter faded when the ranger said, "Imagine the lake breaking tonight." After that, everyone moved faster. Parents learned where children should gather. Men practiced opening the livestock pen in one swing. Women marked the safe path with stones and rope. By each doorway, families kept a small emergency bag ready: torch, medicines, papers, blanket, and a little food. Pema had been the fastest in the drill, leading the yaks uphill without shouting once. That was why the warning now burned inside her so fiercely. Preparedness was not fear, it was love made visible, standing together before the mountain tested them. And now, as she reached the warning post and checked the bell and the radio, she knew that only practice could hold a village together when everything else broke apart. Still, even with the warning posts checked and the bell within reach, convincing everyone proved harder than climbing the ridge. The wind grew warmer by evening, and the valley fell into a strange, listening silence. Under the ice, the water began trickling faster, a hidden urgency Pema could almost hear. She warned the villagers again, pointing to the swollen lake, the slumping edge, the restless yaks. Some believed her at once, grabbing their bags and calling their children. Others frowned and said the glacier had stood longer than any of them, as if age itself were proof of safety. Then the radio crackled with a broken warning from the ridge post, only half the message reaching them through the static. Pema climbed once more and saw the lake edge sinking, sagging little by little, the mountain failing in slow motion before her eyes. Her mouth went dry. This was not waiting anymore. It was breaking. She looked downhill, then toward the evacuation path, and understood the flood could come before night, maybe before anyone finished arguing. She froze only for a breath. Then, from deep inside the glacier, came a heavy boom, low and final, echoing through every bone in the valley. Within seconds of that boom, the glacier lake burst, and the mountain split open with a sound like drums beating under the earth. Water, rocks, and shattered ice tore down the valley as a white serpent, roaring through the gorge and snapping trees like twigs. It sounded like thunder trapped underground, like the glacier itself was screaming for release. The early warning bell rang from the village square, sharp and clear against the chaos. Because they had practiced, people did not freeze. Pema ran first toward her brother, grabbed Tashi's hand and pointed him to the ridge path without a wasted word. She shouted to the yaks, driving them away from the trail before they could panic into the flood. Neighbors answered her calls, moving in a line she had seen only in drills until now. Children clutched their bags, goats bawled, and the red prayer flags above the path snapped hard in the wind, as if the mountain itself were chasing them upward. Yet every step kept the line together, one breath at a time. Then she saw old Ama Lakpa clutching a sack of grain, hesitating at her doorway as the ground shook beneath her. "Leave it," she cried, pulling her forward. "Live first." Together they reached the path just as the flood smashed through the lower lane with a deafening roar. Behind them, the little bridge cracked, buckled, and collapsed, its timbers tumbling into the torrent like a promise broken in half. The flood swallowed sheds, fences, part of the trail, and the prayer wheels by the sacred wall, but the ridge held firm. When the water finally thundered past, the survivors stood together in silence, staring down at the wreckage below, shocked and shaking, yet still standing because they had moved when it mattered most. Eventually, after the last wave drained through the gorge, silence settled over Kyanjin like a heavy blanket. The village moved slowly back down, calling names and counting animals in broken walls one by one. Some homes were torn open and smeared with mud beyond recognition, but not a single life had been lost. When families opened their emergency bags for the first time in real crisis, blankets, medicine, dry food, and clean papers came out like small miracles pulled from the wreckage. Pema watched relief spread across faces that had been tight with fear all day, and she understood something she had only known in theory before. Preparedness was no longer a lesson drawn on a board. It was the reason children slept on dry mats that night instead of wet stones. At the prayer house, mud clung to the flags like grief that would not wash away. A broken fence lay beside a missing basket, and old Ama Lakpa stared at the wreckage for a long time before whispering, "You were right, child." Pema looked away because being right could never make the loss feel smaller. Yet even in their sorrow, people began lifting beams, sharing tea, guiding yaks back to shelter, and finding neighbors who were still shaking. No one waited to be asked. The drill had taught them that too, how to help without hesitation, how to carry each other when the ground had fallen away. In the fading light, grief and gratitude moved side by side through the village, and Kyanjin held both together without shame. When the next morning came, the community began rebuilding, not where they had been, but higher on the slope, where the ground felt safer and the danger line could be clearly seen. New signs marked the flood zone below, and a team of volunteers took turns watching the glacier lake with radios and notebooks, recording every shift in the water and the ice. Pema joined them, not because she was fearless, but because she had listened when others hesitated, and that had made all the difference. The mountain still towered above Kyanjin, powerful and uncertain, yet the village no longer looked at it blindly. They knew now that fear alone does not save lives. Awareness does, planning does, community action does. As fresh prayer flags fluttered beside a new warning bell, Pema stood next to her brother Tashi and watched the wind move gently across the ridge. The mountain had cracked above Kyanjin, but the village had not.